Okay, thank you very much. So I was eager to say something, and then Nick said it. So thank you for saying that. But I also wanted to respond to your point. I mean, I do think this is the expertise on the panel is magnificent and also varied, which is so wonderful. And you're all looking at sort of different parts that are synergistic, but I do think the political part is the part we have to be very focused on, because while we could have a wonderful conference on salad bars, and we should, because we're going to get the creativity and the fine detail that we need to actually implement something. If we don't get the political power behind it, we won't get the salad bar. So one of the things that's very different about 2015 versus 2010 is the New York City Food Forum, which I'll say something about in just a second. I think that the New York City Food Forum, that now has over 90 organizations that have signed on as partner organizations. We started we started in the summer trying to move actually well before the summer, but we implemented in the summer a candidates forum trying to raise the idea of food as a public policy that should be part of the mayoral debates. And now we're really seeing some push in the city government. It's very exciting. But I think that we need to have much more of an organizing model. I believe that New York City Food Forum came out of the New York NYC for CNR, because I think the idea of pulling together as multiple organizations was born there. And then I think we sort of came out of that with New York City Food Forum. I think we need to do much more organizing on the ground. Most people just know that it would be good to have better school food. That's all they know. And I think it's incumbent upon us to get out of our policy boxes and into the communities, see where we can make alliances, and really get the word out, because if it's not a political movement, it's not going to happen. So the brilliance of the ideas will get lost in the lack of political power. I also think that I'm going to plug Nick's book, Lethal But Legal, because he speaks exactly to your concern about the danger of the food manufacturers, what they are pushing on us, and in fact, how the government colludes in that. It's not a surprise that Michelle Obama is pushing the foods that are not so healthy for us. She is in a box, the government is in a box. They're really on lockdown by these corporations, not just the food corporations. We need to be able to change that, or we know the trouble we're in for. So I just want to, again, thank everybody on the panel, because it's a great panel, but we need to build political power that's going to have the effect of carrying these ideas forward.
And maybe if I can just share the sense of urgency. And Kate wasn't here, and I think she would have been able to give more on that policy. But in terms of, just in the sense of urgency, 4 years ago, or last year, when we fought for this, Kirsten Gillibrand was really leading it in this state and asking for 70 cents per child, and we got 6. So that sort of explains, to Nick's point, sort of where we are with dollars and what we really want to strive for. So just to keep those numbers maybe in mind.
Yeah, and I think, we had the first reconvening of the group a few weeks ago, and I think a lot of things that people discuss is really, are we just going to push to hold the line based off of a lot of things that we've had. But I do think there are a lot of opportunities for a lot of those technical procedures and protocols to really take advantage of those, to really transform what school food looks like, and also other things. So things outside of the tray, so how wellness policies work, what things are allowed in schools, and really helping the schools we work with to take advantage of those. Because I think you really need to be able to break down what all those things mean. FRAC had a really, really great PDF that, of course, I read before coming here on the train. And there are all these little things that I think can really transform a school, but really being able to take that and bring it into communities so that they can say, this is no longer allowed in our school, or this is what we're going to push for. And I do think one of the big things too is that economic drive of how we can transform our food economy, because a lot of the food are coming from big corporations, but there's a real great opportunity to push for a lot of this to come from farms that we believe in, farms that we want to support. So I think because it'll be a lot of the same money, but trying to divert it to different to different companies and farms would be really important, something that we can work on, like decreasing the amount we're spending in corporations versus on really small farms.
And I think a part of building the movement is kind of back to what Janet proposed before. I think we need to get teachers and principals part of that political movement as we are moving forward and, you know, realizing the reality of what we are trying to accomplish here. But if they can get on board with it and make this part of their school day and be pushing for it too, I think that that could be a really big piece of it. So getting to principals as they are being trained, getting to principals that are already working, getting to teachers as they're being trained, and the teachers that are already in the schools could be a great way to build it all up.
Rachel? Rachel, right behind you.
Thanks for this great panel. I'm struck by the environment for the modern housewife. I was shocked at one of the previous panels to see that the nice lady who was teaching about food on the radio in New York City stopped teaching, and I said, "Oh my God, you know, I'm so old." When she stopped teaching was when the poor women went to work. They didn't have time to even listen to the radio. And I'm thinking that a barrier to political organizing is that the women who are not poor, but who are working maybe 50, 60 hours a day at a middle-class job, can't get into the complexity of this. And when I think of my own daughter-in-law who's home with the kids, you know, even she says, well, you know, I don't have time for that, you know, because she can pack her kids a wonderful lunch. So I'm wondering if there is some way to reach out to these wonderful women who don't have time for the complexity and isolate some very simple things that they can do to support the principal. So then, you know, the principal tells them what's going on in the school, and you know, once, twice a year, the young, overburdened, middle-class housewife goes and votes and politics.
We're going to run a few minutes more. We've been running till around 10:15, which is beyond our official time. But just let me take this opportunity before I solicit additional comments to invite you to the next Food Policy for Breakfast seminar, which will be on May 20th. It'll be the last one of this academic year. And the title is Getting to Yes on Salt. And we'll be exploring the science, policy, and politics of salt and health with Dr. Tom Farley, the former New York City Health Commissioner and Tisch Fellow here at Roosevelt House. And you may have seen his op-ed in the paper in the New York Times about salt. And Dr. Sandro Galea, the Chair of Epidemiology at the Mailman School of Public Health. So we'd also like to invite you to solicit ideas for topics for the fall seminar series. I think we've done a preliminary identification of dates, but we will continue this series in the fall. So if there are topics you'd like us to organize around, you can email us at the Food Policy Center. Let me see if I can put our logo back up here. Yes, at nycfoodpolicy.org. And I also want to say that if you weren't here for the first public plate session, or if you've misplaced your copy of the executive summary, we have more up here that you can come and pick up, and then if that whets your appetite, there is the 50-page full document on the web and the appendix. Let me go back. Before Rachel spoke, I saw quite a lot of hands. Are there additional questions or comments lurking? Okay. Ashley, pass the...
Good morning. Thank you for your comments. I was wondering if we can go back, because I think all the efforts that we want to make in schools, again, unless it's a priority of the principal, like you said, it really is trying to go upstream. So what do you think is the feasibility of making sure that like physical activity, nutrition, and wellness is a bigger part of the principal's review as well as the overall school review? Because I think right now is a very small portion of what the schools are accounted for?
I think we have a long way to go before we get there, but one sort of easier recommendation I can make is to start a wellness council in your school, and that's something that's not that difficult to do. Get parents, like-minded parents, and then that council can be more of an official forum to sort of push these agendas and issues to the principal.
Yeah, and I just want to make a quick note, though, because, principals have a lot of things on their plate. And the way it's actually seen, too, with a lot of things that work in the cafeteria is that the cafeteria really isn't, the domain of the principal. It's really a domain of the Office of School Food that administers the program. So there are things where a principal can step in about chocolate milk or maybe a salad bar, but a lot of the things that are happening have to deal with the Office of School Food that runs the program. And so I think really pushing for the school administration and the Office of School Food to talk to each other more, I think is really important. And starting from there, because if you don't have a school food manager on board and changes that you want to see, that's going to make it very difficult. So getting parents involved in that conversation, students, or having a wellness council that includes the school food manager is really important, because I don't want to put all the burden on the principal in order to have that, even though they do have a great influence on what the culture of the school is like.
That being said, the principal does not run the cafeteria. However, the Office of School Food will listen to the principal. So an aggressive, annoying principal can get what he or she wants from the Office of School Food.
Right, and principals have a leadership role with their with their faculty. And we all have heard stories of faculty members who diss the school lunch in front of students, and that needs to end. So I think principals, there's a role. But I'm interested that, in a way, it's a research question. And it would be time to do some research to look and see if there are large city school systems where cafeteria school food participation is a part of the principal's reviews. And so thank you for that interesting.
And given our current, political situation in New York City, where we have a new mayor, we have a new chancellor, and the new chancellor is talking about thinking more holistically about children, thinking more about teacher professional development, thinking, less about test prep, and saying that publicly, that this fits into. I think that we are at a time where we can do both things, have models of schools that actually have made wellness and nutrition a core of what they're doing and highlight those schools and bring them up, as well as working from the top down to really have, as Jan said before, basically have something that really does make that's accountable from the top. So I think we can be doing both things, as well as researching it and figuring out what will work.
I just read about the Fifth Street School in the Lower East Side, and I was reading about their rooftop garden and how they grow a lot of the vegetables that then make it into the cafeteria, and the kids are really involved in growing that food. I was just wondering, how feasible is it to emulate that program into, citywide schools? How, emulate, implement gardening and farming into the education, maybe an after-school program? How feasible is something like that?
So the Grow to Learn program is what registers the school gardens, and actually it's gone from, in a couple of years, it's now up to over 400 registered school gardens out of somewhere between 17 and 1,800 schools in the city. And we're looking into some of the ones that are really having the kids have a good maintenance plan for the garden, having the kids get into the gardens, and also the garden be in school culture, that I think we will be able to have more and more frameworks and guidelines for how to make that happen in more schools.
Yeah, and we work with a school that has a rooftop garden that has their seed money comes from Grow to Learn, as well as a bigger garden that's actually a vacant lot, which is really important, because a lot of things that happen with school gardens is what happens over the summer when those students aren't there. So creating those really strong partnerships is really important. So I think schools can do it, and it is growing very rapidly, and I think it's an area people are very interested in. But I always encourage schools to really think through how to partner to make sure when the kids are gone, or especially little kids, who get really excited but can't actually do a lot of the labor once produce starts growing over the summer and into the fall. To really think through that. But there's a lot of great resources, and I think if a school makes it a priority, they can do it. Okay.
this will be our last question or comment.
I went to a conference in Washington at the beginning of March, and the day before the formal conference, I went to a mini local conference just for Washington, D.C., and one of the programs I learned about there, it isn't going to improve nutrition, but because it's so small, it's possible that it could be introduced inside classrooms, and it was called growing microgreens, a way of growing minute plants that come to growth in about 2 weeks, and the children can snip them off and actually taste them. So it's something that could happen in classrooms in the wintertime and not cost much money and possibly enable children to just get a first sense of the fact that something can start as a seed and grow in a few weeks and actually become something you can taste. So it's just a thought for something an idea that could be shared. Very little money is involved, a very short time is involved. It can happen in the winter. So it just as a thought of something that might get on the agenda somewhere.
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
The woman right behind her has been so very patient in raising your hand.
And I
Yeah.
couldn't see. All right.
It's okay.
All right.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
And this is probably a little bit far off, but I'm wondering, in terms of farm to cafeteria, what kind of research is being done on the disparity, I guess the supply and demand between supply of the local food and demand, and having formerly worked for an institutional college dining service program, I know that one challenge certainly was matching when the menus were created with how we could sort of quickly turn around and evolve to get the local seasonal produce on the menu, because the menus usually had been created in advance. So I guess that cheated and was kind of two questions, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, I think, BOC has been working a lot thinking around local procurement and ways to do that. And I think, the Office of School Food in New York City purchases more food than anyone in the entire country except for the U.S. military. And it's like ingrained in my brain because I always use that as a way to show what the scale is like. And so I think what's really, so first of all, no, like there's so much food and there needs to be a lot of processing around food hubs, which is actually a really great job creator. But I think we're really thinking about, pushing school districts to focus on a percentage and scaling up that way, as well as seeing what's available in the area, like what's already growing, and using that as a guideline to kind of move along that process.
But people are.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say what you were going to say. But I think it's just also a good time to point out, back to the original comment, which is we're not going to see really, really, really big change or important change until we start subsidizing smaller farms versus the big three commodities. And that's just an important thing to know.
Seems like a good note on which to end, because I was just about to point out that despite our responsiveness to Nick and Nancy's questions, we got back to the small-scale creative innovation. And having just come also from the Farm to Cafeteria conference, I have to say there's a lot of energy and creativity out there for us to harness. But we can't afford to ignore those larger policy issues. So I'm really glad Nancy brought us back to the kind of fundamental issues of what do we subsidize in this country. And we do need to mobilize, just for starters, in the traditional way of alerting your Congress, your representative in the House, that you are interested in the upcoming child nutrition reauthorization, and you hope that he or she will play a leadership role. And then as we can agree on a set of principles going forward. It's old-fashioned and it's slogging and it isn't revolutionary, but with child nutrition especially, because there is this enormous constituency and it's in every congressional district in the country. All congressional districts have child care centers and after-school programs in schools. We really do have a potential, I think, to make a difference. And on that happy note, I'll dismiss you all into what I hope isn't pouring rain, and hope you come back on May 20th.